stuff, come.
Here we are at the President Nixon Library, enjoying a great boondocking.
And here we are, boondocking spot at our camper. And right on the other side of that fence is Nixon's birthplace house, the original house of where he was born. So that's how close we stayed to his original house.
Well, here's Christoph taking a walk up. Now that we're at the Nixon Library, it is during the shutdown, so there's only a certain part of the libraries open.
Looks like a helicopter. Wow, hey guys, look at the helicopter. That's pretty neat. Well, here's the front of the building, the entrance going in. Not sure what time it's going to open today.
What time did they open today? 10? Oh, okay, thank you.
Well, here we are in the entrance of the library, and President Nixon's portrait right there. Of course, the library is closed because of the shutdown, and this is going down the hallway where we see all the flags of the different countries on both sides.
This is an actual representation of the East Room of the White House. And look who we found in the East Room of the White House.
And here we are looking outside. The grounds are absolutely gorgeous. The day turned out to be pretty nice, and trees and everything, and really spectacular looking grounds.
Oh, look who we have coming to visit us. Hi there, Mrs. Arnold. That's Jeannie. That's the actual house that Nixon was born in, right on this property.
He says, I was born in a house my father built. In 1912, Frank and Hannah Nixon built this modest farmhouse on their small citrus ranch. Here, Richard Nixon was born January 9, 1913, and spent his first 9 years. He served his country as Congressman, U.S. Senator, Vice President, and 37th President of the United States. He was the first native-born Californian to hold the presidency. President Nixon achieved significant advances in international diplomacy by ending U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, opening lines of communication with China and the Soviet Union, and initiating the Middle East peace process.
And there's a picture of their house with the pepper tree. And I'll just swing around and show you our boondocking spot. It is right there. And right over there is the helicopter.
Birthplace, Richard Milhouse Nixon. This is on the plaque. President of the United States of America, inaugurated January 20th, 1969. Inaugurated for second term, January 20th, 1973. We are proud of our native son, a man who has spared nothing of himself to help build a great nation.
So, where are you from? You can step right over that way.
Okay.
Hi, is Richard home?
Yeah.
Thanks, Richard, too.
Okay, we'll start over here on the left over here. This house originally from the kid had 2 bedrooms. This bedroom and the bedroom over there now that you'll see later was actually converted to a sewing room and a lavatory when we got forced water. But that's called a friendship quilt. Hannah was a strong friend, or what they call Quaker. She was born in Indiana and very strong. Frank was Methodist. They got married in the Friends Church, the Quaker Church, and in fact, they built the first, I belong to the Yorba Linda Friends Church. Raised Baptists were really like an EV free church now. We've grown from a small number all the way up to now we had 11,000 on our campus here over the holidays, 3 campuses. But anyway, they built, actually Frank helped build the little church down here. It's a Baptist church on Lemon and Main. And it's that was the first Friends Church. She and Frank taught Sunday school there. But that friendship quilt, you notice the baskets, and I don't know if you understand friendship. We have a neighbor that is in a sewing group, and they make afghans and blankets, but they sew squares, and you can see an initial under a basket there on that quilt, and then the other blanket. Those were wedding gifts that they got from the group that she belonged to. And the frames on the pictures above the headboard, and that's the original bed, by the way, but those frames, Richard actually made those frames for the 2 things that you see out there. And then the dresser in there, you'll see a Bible stuff. The Bible was Harold's, and the other 2 were the paternal grandparents. Now, the neat thing about stuff in here is, what I never realized, as smart as Richard was politically, but his father, Frank, had a 6th grade education. And he was driving a trolley car in Ohio in the wintertime and got frostbite on his feet, and that's when he decided to come to California. Ended up at Whittier and was driving actually on an electrical train there from Whittier into LA. Ran that, and that's where he happened to meet someone that actually knew and said, hey, why don't you ask this person out here? So he got home. That's how he met Hannah. The Millhouses lived there. This is original table, and that chair was used by all 5 of the boys. But the dad, Frank, would sit the boys down after dinner at night and debate. And Richard loved to debate with him, but he was really into politics, and even though he had a 6th grade education, he was extremely smart. And I think Richard got a lot of his education on foreign policy. He had an uncle in Millhouse, one boy that was a brother of Hannah's that actually got the magazines. And he said, if I hadn't been a politician, I would have been a musician. He had the aunt and uncle that lived in the Millhouse side that lived in Whittier actually provided piano and violin lessons to him. And he ended up playing and learning 5 instruments. He played the piano and the violin and the clarinet and the saxophone and the accordion. Wow. And if you'd had a chance to have gone through the museum today, we have a player piano of a song that he actually played at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville.
Oh, how fun.
So, but yeah, I never realized, and he loved it, from my understanding is he loved to entertain when people would come to the White House. He loved to play the piano or whatever. The photograph that you see up here, that's taken of all 5 boys at around the age of 4. And the original photo was actually in the National Archive Record Administration Center down here in our library. But Harold is the first boy. He was 3 years old when they moved in. And as I mentioned outside, he died of tuberculosis at 23. Mm-hmm. Richard is the one sitting on a chair, second from the left. And then the middle one is actually, that's Donald, named after Franklin Donald. He was named after his father. Next one, Arthur, died at 7 with tuberculosis, or tubular encephalitis. And then Edward's the last one. 88, retired geologist, now living in Seattle. But it's amazing that so many of them, Donald actually died 73 with cancer, and I don't know if you knew that Pat actually died of lung cancer. I never realized she was a heavy smoker and never smoked out in the public, only in private. And when they made a trip to China in 1972, Mao Zedong gave her looked like a cigarette package that had 2 pandas on it. He thought he was giving her a pack of cigarettes. He actually gave her 2 pandas. That's what the box was. But really interesting. So anyway, the fireplace, this is the fireplace that he built. And so many people liked that they asked him to build others. And the clock and the different stuff here, this was the wedding picture of Frank and Hannah. And over there on the wall behind us, that's Frank and Hannah. Those are the 2 girls, Julie and Tricia, the granddaughters. All the books you see on the left here actually were Richard's books. He read and studied all of those books. They called him at Duke University. I don't know if you knew this. They called him Iron Butt. And in the Lincoln room, we have, you walk in, there's a blue wall with scribbled stuff, all this scribbling going, you see the writing and stuff. There's a picture of him on a chess lounge with a yellow legal pad. He made copious notes, all the time was making notes. And he had a lot of, didn't spend much time in the Oval Office. He went into a little inner office where they had a small dining room office, and he was always in there. He did 37 speeches from the Oval Office himself when he was here. But he always was extremely fastidious and tedious about the stuff that he was going to say. For whatever reason, this is a picture, by the way, of the Han is the tallest. The other 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 girls and a brother. And so their parents were quite wealthy. But when Han and Frank actually left here and went to Whittier, they bought a little gas station, Atlantic Richfield gas station, and had a general store. So the 3 older boys got to work in the store. This, I have no idea, it was a picture, a photograph from 1620. This couple supposedly landed at Plymouth Rock. And someone says that there's some ancestry, and I don't know if it's a Millhouse or the Nixon family. Patricia and Richard are both buried over there. They had to transfer that property to her.
You can see from their house where we were camping, their trailer right down there. Is that convenient?
Everything. But when they went through the unwrapped and went inside of it, the inside except for the cockpit was totally all intact. That's why we don't allow any flash photography. Of course, we're not allowed to go in there now because of the shutdown. Otherwise, we'd let 4 people go through at a time. Oh. But I can basically tell you about the helicopter. Anyway, he decided, he talked to the birthplace, and he put $50,000 out of his own pocket. And they were able to get a military cargo ship to fly it to the Riverside Reserve Air Force Base. And the museum people out there said, hey, if you can get parts, we'll restore the helicopter. So they went to the boneyard, the Air Force boneyard in Arizona, and they found a Coast Guard plane, and they got all of the stuff that they needed to redo. The only thing missing are the engines, but the transmission, everything in the cockpit, they had new rotators built on both the front and the back. Sikorsky gave them all of the paint, and also they were able to get the U.S. seal. And this plane will accommodate, you have a pilot that sits on the right, not the left, like on a fixed wing. Inside, the pilot sits on the right-hand side, the co-pilot on the left. Right inside the door, there's a seat out of the cockpit. A Secret Service agent sat there, and at the very back, it seated 16 passengers. There was also a chief maintenance officer that flew too. He had a drop-down seat just outside of the cockpit. The president's seat is actually sitting on the left-hand side facing the cockpit. There's a seat ahead of him which Pat or whoever was flying in with will sit. The seat that he sat in has a red telephone on the left in case there's an emergency. On the left and right side there was a bench that would seat 4 people, and the military aide was always sitting there with a football. That's the nuclear case of a nuclear threat coming up. He always carried that computer with him, and wherever he went, Air Force One, Lemon, you always have that guy with him, because you have several people that have to enter a code if they ever said, okay, we're going to, you know, bring up all of the nuclear weapons that we have. So let's hope that never happens. But thank God we have people that, we have several people that's involved in doing that. But anyways, then in addition to that, you would have, on long trips overseas, the personal physician would go along. So then you would even have other dignitaries. He flew a lot of people, like Anwar Sadat. Anwar Sadat flew on this several times. He was the president of Egypt. In 1974, when Nixon flew over to Egypt to see the pyramids, he actually took another Sikorsky helicopter with him. And he was going to give this helicopter, the 150-617, and he said, no, Boyer said, no way are you giving this. When they go on a mission overseas, the Vatican or wherever they would go, they have to remove all of the props. It takes about, the rotators here, it takes about 16 minutes to take those off. Then they would store those, about 3 or 5 of them, in a C-5 at that time, not a C-17, with a C-130 behind them with all kinds of spare parts. A lot of logistics involved in going overseas. And so when he went there, he actually gave Anwar Sadat one of those helicopters. And when Yasser Arafat, who was the Palestinian Liberation Organization leader, when he died in Cairo, they used the Sikorsky helicopter. The president owned that helicopter. They flew his body from Cairo to Ramallah, where he was actually buried.
This is the actual helicopter that's been restored. And there we are, right down there. Great boondocking spot. And that's the door there where President Nixon would have walked up and got onto the helicopter and gave his final wave as he left for the last time the White House.
Tombstone says the greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. And for Mrs. Nixon, even when people can't speak your language, they can tell if you have love in your heart.